Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Lori Ann Stretch, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about experiential therapies. Experiential therapies are a really great tool to have in your counseling toolbox. I'm going to turn off my video so we can focus on the content. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to talk about the role of creativity in counseling, identify ethical and multicultural considerations, and also use a creative or experiential technique for counseling and show you kind of what's done in that process, how it's done, and then talk about what happened in the process as well. So, what are experiential therapies? There are many different types of experiential therapies, and depending on who you talk to, it will change what they include. But for me as a counselor, experiential therapies that I like to use include art, music, play therapy, sand play therapy, and yoga or body mindfulness techniques. There's many others. As you can see, there's additional ones here on this list, but those are the ones that I use in a lot of my clinical practice. So what are the benefits of experiential therapies? Well, it does allow for new perspectives and exploration of thinking about things in a different way. It can provide more individualized treatment and give clients concrete takeaways from their experiences. It also can help unearth things that maybe the client isn't quite ready to verbalize, but they can demonstrate or they can show. And regardless of the counselor's theoretical orientation, you can use experiential therapies. And it really doesn't have an age limit. I've used it with children, adolescents, young adults, middle-aged adults, older adults. It really is quite beneficial for all ages. And if a client is really struggling to wrap words around an event or an experience, this is a great tool to use to help them demonstrate what they're feeling and experiencing versus trying to put words to it, which can sometimes in and of itself be traumatic. And ultimately, using experiential therapies can help both the client and the counselor grow in understanding. Now, creativity in general is a really important tool in counseling. It helps us develop good emotional health, social skills, problem-solving abilities. It really gives us the opportunity to interact with our environment and our world. And sometimes it's described as out-of-the-box thinking, but I like to think of creativity as just a part of who we are. So it's not so much out of the box as it is just allowing yourself to think about things from a different perspective. And I think that practicing creative processes really teaches self-care as well, because for most people, when they engage in some sort of creative activity, it becomes a nurturing and self-nourishing experience. Now, when you're doing experiential therapies, you do need to respect client autonomy, and that is a client has the right to refuse to do an activity or maybe not want to do an activity, and that needs to be something that is okay and that you give them the opportunity to opt out of something. They need to have informed consent. They need to understand what's happening with the exercise, what's going to be done in the exercise, and just they need to know what they are going to experience. So they shouldn't be going into it completely blind. And just like everything else, ethical decision making is a continuous active process. So you might start doing something with the client and realize, oh, this isn't going the way I thought it would. And maybe it's not the best choice for that client. So sometimes we have to look at each situation and determine what's going to be the best situation with that client in that particular moment. Multiculturally, a lot of our therapies tend to be very linear and problem-oriented, very Western in their approach. And a lot of people don't think that way, especially when you talk about collectivistic cultures and individuals that have been exposed to a lot of different cultures. And there's also the idea of historical distrust. For me as a counselor who's perceived as a majority, I have to be really aware that there's some historical and generational distrust with white individuals. And so when I'm working with others that might not be of the majority, then I have to really recognize that distrust and try to explain what's going on so that and what we hope to get out of an activity so that it's really the activity that they're focused on and not trying to understand what I might be trying to get out of it. And just really incorporating culture is just a critical component in all aspects. While I am perceived as white, I'm also very much Native American, and I'm very proud to be Native American. And because of that, that has a different influence on me, and it has an influence on my culture and the way I was raised. And for example, in sand play therapy, the sand play therapy trays that I make have that influence. It becomes evident in what I do. So I need to make sure that I'm respecting and encouraging that expression with my clients. Very important to be able to recognize culture and celebrate the culture. I love this quote from Plato. You can discover more about a person in an hour of play than in a year of conversation. I think it's a great way of thinking about experiential therapies. Now, the ultimate goal with an experiential therapy is to increase what a person knows about themselves and what others, being the counselor, knows about that person as well. So this is the Johari window. And with the Johari window, with feedback, we can increase the amount of information somebody knows about themselves. With exploration, we can increase what others and self know about something. And then with disclosure, we can increase what we know about ourselves to others. So it's a really helpful tool in framing what it means to process information within a counseling session. So part of our goal here in these experiential therapies is to really expand that window of knowns to self and to others. Next, we're going to go into a demo and a demonstration with a dear colleague and friend of mine, Diana Wagner, and she's going to demonstrate the bridge exercise with me. And then she is going to have a conversation with me about what the experience was like and what she gained from it. So Diana, thank you so much for being with me today and demonstrating this activity.
You're welcome.
Thanks. So do you have a sheet of paper and some markers?
I do. I have just plain white paper and then markers.
Okay, great. That's awesome. Thank you for bringing those. So what I'd like you to do is to orient your paper in any way. It can be sideways, diagonal, long ways, whichever way feels right to you.
Like a hot dog or a hamburger.
Exactly.
Okay. I chose hamburger.
Okay, awesome.
Horizontal.
And then, you can tell you were a kindergarten teacher. Yes. So then I'd like for you to draw a bridge, real or imagined. And it can be any size bridge, any shape bridge, whatever feels best to you.
Okay.
Okay. Now that you've drawn your bridge, think about what details your bridge is calling to have. Like what other things need to be on the page in order for your picture to feel complete?
Does it have to be part of the bridge or anything else?
Anything you need to include. It could be anything around, above, under.
Okay. I'm just tell you, I'll show you at the end, but I'm putting grass on each side because I feel like you need a starting point and an ending point if you're going to go over a bridge.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know where I'm going and where I'm coming from and where I'm going. And then I'm going to add somewhat kind of pebbles or stones on my bridge because I kind of like it somewhat aesthetically pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of bridges as happy things. So I'm going to add the sunshine and a cloud just because I think that makes it a little happier. So
Okay, awesome. All right, now imagine that you are somewhere on this picture. Where would you be? And find a way to symbolize yourself as a symbol, as a stick figure, as whatever it is that you feel like you need to be. And then use an arrow to indicate what way, if any, you're moving.
well, I do think that you're, I think bridges, you kind of go, it's like a skill. You go a little that way and then you go a little bit this way, but I did pick a point. I think sometimes you take a step, two steps backwards, one step forward kind of thing, but I did kind of pick a point where I am and which way I'm moving.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you want me to show you?
Let's wait one more second. I would like
Sure.
for you to think about a title for your picture too.
Oh,
So, and if you could write your title either on the front of your picture or back, whichever feels best. What might you title it?
okay. You'll like the title.
All right. So, if you're willing, I'd like to take a
Yeah.
look at it.
Okay, so it's a big arch bridge, kind of like you see in that typical, I don't know, it's like a painting, and then not real great pebble stones, but and then it's titled Unexpected Progress. And I think it's flipped on the screen, but I'm moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like right in the middle, but I'm still moving forward.
Okay. All right.
Is
Tell
I
me.
think the screen flips it, but
Oh yeah, the screen flips. It's fine. I can envision.
yeah.
So imagine yourself standing on that bridge where you've indicated yourself. What
Mhm.
are some of the feelings that come about for you as you imagine standing on that bridge and thinking about where you're headed?
Well, I honestly always go back to where I came from because even when I'm almost towards the end of the bridge, I think it's easy to forget that I'm not just at the beginning. Like is there really progress? Like do I really think there's progress? And then I'm like, oh yeah, there is. So I think, oh, what we have, I always have to try to remind myself, where am I? And then there's always a little, I think, happy bridges, but there's some fear because I'm analyzing, am I going to get there?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, are you okay in either point? So, darn, bridges are always emotional.
They are emotional, and
Always.
yeah, and there's a few things that stand out for me because I know you really well, and one of the things that I noticed about your bridge is you talked about it being of stone.
Mhm.
And that really didn't surprise me because one of the things that I know about you is that you have really strong ties to your family and a very strong sense of values. And that's how we usually see that reflected is people will draw a really sturdy, strong bridge
Mhm.
that shows that they're grounded, right? They've got something to connect to.
Mhm.
The other thing that was interesting is the sun and the cloud, right? Even though you described that as making your bridge happy, symbolically, that really represents optimism and questioning.
Mhm.
And I think that, when I think about your journey right now, and that relates to faith,
Mhm.
right? That the sun and the cloud really is representative of that. Like the sun is, I have this strong faith and this is what I believe in, and I know that I can trust this process. But
But it
then
still
there's
may pour down rain.
exactly, like it's still, it's always not going to be perfect. There's going to be, these things that kind of obscure that faith and make me question things.
Mhm.
Um, and that was really evident as you were kind of talking about it and in the drawing. I'm curious about the title Unexpected Progress and what that reflects and means to you.
I think sometimes I feel like I haven't made progress. So I think the unexpected comes when it's like, oh yeah, you didn't expect you would grow this much, and maybe it doesn't look like you thought it would. I think that's the unexpected part. It doesn't look exactly like you thought it would, but it's still progress.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's unexpected, because I didn't think it would look like that. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. When
So
you think about your life right now, if you don't mind me poking just a
it's
little,
okay.
um, I wonder what that is.
I just laugh because it's like to find it. It is so
Mhm.
scary. It took a long time to find it. But I guess mostly that has false. I mean, that is usually fertility for me and having kids. It is the will we, have we made progress, and not just progress of having a kid and trying, but like emotional, mental progress. Because it's not always, the picture is not, oh, we got there. It's a mental. Oh, how am I feeling about it? Do I feel like I'll be okay either way?
Mm-hmm.
So
And I think recently there's been some unexpected in that journey.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's been a lot of, are you okay no matter what? And I think the unexpected sometimes makes me realize that I am more okay with my present circumstances than I think I am.
Mm-hmm.
You can want something and still be okay with where you are. And that is confusing and kind of hard, but I started off making the line that went forward, this arrow like kind of small, and then I was like, oh, it's a lot bigger. I'm actually like moving a lot closer than I think. And I think that is the realizing it's okay to want something and be okay where you are and happy,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know? So,
And being okay with taking those 2 steps back that you mentioned, that
yeah.
sometimes you'll take 1 step forward and 2 steps back, but in the way you're still making some progress.
Hmm. And I know I can go 20 steps back and still say, this is just a moment. But that, I mean, that's taken years of progress and, and working, but I can say, this is just a moment. This is just a day.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes personally, because I'm a helper, I can stand on the other end and say, and look back at someone who's on the opposite end and say, you'll get there. Give it
Mm-hmm.
time. I know it's hard, but so I know that different days are different, but overall that there's a forward motion,
Yeah.
you know.
And
And again, it's not about the actual,
mm-hmm.
do we have a baby or not, or of our own. It is a mental of, it is really, are you happy with your status quo where you are in life, no matter if you get what you want or not, whether it could be a job or whatever. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that was really well represented by the grass on either end of your bridge, because
mhm,
you know that no matter where you land, you're going to land in a solid, healthy space.
right. Yeah, and that is, I want to know that whatever the process, either end is okay. And it was the same. It's the same either way. It's okay to be on one side or the other,
Mm-hmm.
whether I feel like that or not.
Yeah. Sorry, the heater kicked on.
It's okay. It's
So,
like virtual play therapy.
yeah, virtual play therapy. That's right. So, okay. So, Dana, thank you so much for doing that exercise with me.
You're welcome.
I'm kind of wondering, from an experiential therapy component, like, you're a counselor, I'm a counselor, like, what was it like for you to go through that process?
It's always surprisingly emotional, even though, but I know that I'm a little more in tune than most. I can think bridge and think, oh, great, okay, we're gonna have to talk about, where I feel and all those things and where am I on it. But it's surprising that you can take something so simple and turn it into something meaningful. And it also gives me a lot of power because I can draw this bridge and I can talk about it to the extent that I want to. If
Mm-hmm.
I was not ready to explain what that is, it would be okay. And
Mm-hmm.
you would be okay with that. I know you would. You'd say, that is really scary to
Yeah.
talk about. It is
Mm-hmm.
really scary. And that might be 6 months down the road that I say, you know what that is? And you'd say, no. You'd be shocked. But that gives you a lot of power for someone to say, I, I, I don't know. I don't know what that is. And then do it on their own. And it's only a bridge. It's one marker. It's a paper, but it gives them a lot of power. And the whole title thing is, I mean, that's also, you got to be farther along to be able to title really process your feelings. But that gives ownership to say, this is what it is. I'm going to name it. I'm not going to be as maybe scared or I'm not going to fear what I don't name.
Right. It makes you look at it, right? It puts it
Yeah,
out there, and you don't have to examine it and share that, but you do find yourself examining it. You do have yourself thinking about it.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I find it helpful too. I mean, one of the things that I like about this exercise, as you mentioned, is pretty simplistic. It doesn't take much. There's not many materials involved. People
It's
can
not
be,
artistic.
yeah, people can be as artistic or not as artistic as they want to be. The other thing is that I find real power in looking at bridges over time. So if I'm working with a client over a series of time, then I might have them do the bridge when we first start our work together, then maybe, a few sessions, like, depending on how long I have to work with them, maybe halfway through and then near the end. And it's a really powerful testament to the journey that they go through.
And I also say I actually like drawing it better than I like picking play therapy um, little bridges because I don't ever find the exact one I want. I mean,
Mhm.
I kind of do, but at least even though I didn't spend a lot of time on my bridge, in my head, I know what it looks like. And
Right.
when I pick one, actually, I'm like, yeah, that kind of looks like him. I didn't really want it quite like that. So for me, at least, I can be like, that's my bridge. And
Mhm.
I mean, I know everybody's different. Sometimes people are more tactile, but I like knowing that, no, mine looks like this, not the one, even if you had 20 choices. So,
Yeah. Well, and the true thing about, being a sand play therapist is that, my sand play collection represents me.
and you can't help that.
Right.
It is
And
the
that's
filter of
where,
who you are. Yeah.
yeah. And like I don't know if you remember this, but Eloisa and I used to buy pieces for each other because,
Uh-huh.
I mean, her personality, her culture being Brazilian,
And hers
very,
hers represented hers more. I remember she
exactly.
had things I would never have picked becoming from her culture of
Hmm.
Hispanic and Brazil and all that. Things I'd have never would have thought about in that way.
Yeah, that
Also,
really
she's way more,
enriched the
yeah.
collection because she brought a different perspective. Like I
Mhm.
distinctly remember this one piece she gave me. It was the body of a woman who was pregnant, and you could see the baby inside. But there was
Yes.
no head, there was no arms, there were no legs, and that piece was a really powerful piece for many of my clients
Uh-huh.
as they were going through that process. But I think you're right. This gives that subjective perspective where the client gets to define what happens in that
Hmm.
space. Yeah.
Right. But you
Mhm.
also have to have someone who's willing to say, I'm going to actually draw it. And if I wasn't ready, like I have been in this for this picture in parts of my life where I'm not even ready to draw the bridge yet. And so you kind of have to know, are you ready to do that?
Mhm.
Because
That's
you
a
have to
really good
be
point.
somewhat ready to face it, but not name it. But I know that I've been where I might not have been ready. Or I might have been like, really? I'm not
Mhm.
on a bridge.
No, not even on the bridge. The bridge is
Don't
just
even
on the paper.
Yeah, I mean, I've been there, like where I'm like, and so I think you have to gauge
Where the
where
client.
someone's ready. And again, also while you're doing it, how much they're ready to talk about it, because it could have gone, there's my bridge. It's scary. I don't want to talk about it.
Right, exactly. And the other thing too is really recognizing, especially with experiential therapies, that different materials will elicit more emotion than others. So, for example, if I had started you out, markers are pretty good. Pencils, they're pretty. You can put some space between you and what you're doing.
Yes.
Crowns tend to be much more cathartic. I can't say it, cathartic,
Yeah,
and that I guess it regresses us back to being children.
it does. I use personally crayons for more actually just getting the feelings out because I press harder and or I press softer. I draw angry or whatever. Markers don't, but I can express more with markers if that makes sense. So I
Mhm.
use them different ways for that.
Yeah, and it's
But yeah,
about being attuned to the material because chalks or pastels are going to be much more that cathartic, like
yes,
emotion, raw emotion expression. Clay, Play-Doh,
yeah.
even sand in wet sand more than dry sand will really elicit a lot of emotion from clients.
Hmm.
And so you have to be cautious with that because if a client doesn't have the coping skills yet to know how to manage those emotions, especially if they feel overwhelming,
You're
got
just
to,
dropping them in the deep end without any
exactly, like
a
without
life jacket.
yeah,
You're like, here's all your emotions. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I agree. And but I also really like markers because not even the exercise. Furthermore, they use for me as a distraction to be able to do something and think about my feelings without overanalyzing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes it's just like, oh, you're drawing your, or I had coloring sheets. Like sometimes just coloring sheets. You can color while someone talks, and it's not as, I don't know. I don't make the connection to the emotions quite as sink. So if it's so deep of a pool, I don't feel like I'm sinking. I'm kind of just looking at the pool, but then later I can talk about it and be like, oh, dang, that pool was really deep and it
Yes.
had a lot of emotions, but I was trying to distract myself by coloring, but it helped me talk and process it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I find that to be really true. I like to keep mandalas on hand. And, I have this one memory of this one client in particular. She was talking about her son, her older son, and her husband who had had an emotional affair. Not a physical, but had had an emotional affair with someone else. And it was not funny, but kind of funny to watch her color, because as she was talking about her younger son, everything was kind of like light and airy and
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. And when she was talking about her older son who knew about dad's thing, it was a little more like rigid, but you're still there. And when she talked about her husband, she would outline whatever section she was, and she would change colors with every person that she talked about. So like her younger son had a color, her older son had a color, and then her husband had a color, and she had a color. But I thought it was fascinating that she didn't do boundaries on anybody else, except when she got to the piece when she was talking about her husband, she would outline the edge of it to the point where I thought she was going to press through the paper. It was
Yeah,
that
boundaries for
intense.
herself.
Right, boundaries, right? But it
Yeah.
was really interesting to watch how the process of what she was doing was
Yes.
reflective of what she was experiencing.
Yes. And I've done that exercise, but I will say sometimes it's too much. It was the first time I did it years ago. It was too much for me to actually analyze that much
Mm-hmm.
at once, because it was like all those things all on paper. But it was still helpful to get them out. It was almost a starting point
Right.
for me to say, oh, you've got a lot of feelings, but
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't address it all at once. I think you just really have to be aware of where your client is in their own space and their own emotions. Are they wearing their life jacket? Do they
Mm-hmm.
have some coping skills yet? Or are we just literally seeing the water for the first
Are
time?
we acknowledging that they exist?
Yeah,
Right.
because honestly, most of us don't acknowledge that they in an everyday life,
Right.
you know.
But I do think that the experiential therapies give the client a safe way of acknowledging and
Yes.
processing, because I think when we try to do it through talk therapy alone, it's really limiting, because sometimes I don't
Vague.
have, well, and I don't have the language for it, right?
Well, and I don't either. I still don't. As a counselor, I still cannot tell you, like, I still use that and it, and because I don't have the language unless you prompt me. Now I can make myself, but it's a lot harder,
Right.
and so I don't think we do as counselors, but we also, it's just very vague. Like, how do you feel about that? Well, I don't know.
Right. Well, it's kind of like,
Tough.
what's your culture? Oh, I don't know. It's
Right.
like, but when you ask to draw it or demonstrate or show me photographs that represent it gives you a different way of expressing yourself.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. And I think that also it gives them a little bit of tools, or remembering that they can go in another room and go color their picture, and no, if minus their title, no one's going to be like, what are you doing? They can take this outside and go draw on a piece of paper, and for the most part not worry of someone judging, oh, that's your counseling homework.
Right.
No, I'm just drawing a picture. So I
Hmm.
think that helps a lot, because you give them a tool with there.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Well, I really appreciate you processing and doing this
Hey,
exercise with me.
hey, no problem. So all right, cool.
Okay, welcome back. So now we're going to look at what was involved in the bridge. You heard us talk about it. These are the materials, paper and markers, and then some of the prompts that I used are outlined for you here as well, and then the reflection. What and how did the client describe the bridge? Now, if you want to learn more about experiential therapies, I've created a list here of a lot of different resources that are available in Canada, and I hope that you'll take some time to explore some of these because they're really very useful resources where you can learn more about how to get specialized training and information about each one of the experiential therapies. And then finally, here's our references, just to go back to the beginning of the presentation and some of the points that we were talking about why we do experiential therapies. I hope that this presentation has been helpful and the demonstration was informative. Let me know if you have any questions, and enjoy.